Yahweh is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. This God does not faint or grow weary, with a depth of understanding that is unsearchable. God gives strength to the weary and empowers the powerless. Young women may grow tired and weary, young men may stumble and fall, but those who wait for Yahweh find a renewed power. They soar on eagle's wings. They run and don't get weary. They walk and never tire. And from 2 Corinthians, the 6th chapter. As Christ's co-workers, we beg you not to receive the grace of God in vain. For God says through Isaiah, "At the acceptable time I hear you, and on the day of salvation I helped you." Now is the acceptable time. Now is the day of salvation. We take pains to avoid giving offense to anyone, for we don't want our ministry to be blamed. Instead, in all that we do, we try to present ourselves as ministers of God, acting with patient endurance amid trials, difficulties, distresses, beatings, imprisonments, and riots, in hard work, sleepless nights, and hunger. We conduct ourselves with innocence, knowledge, patience, and kindness in the Holy Spirit, in sincere love, with the message of truth and the power of God, wielding the weapons of justice with both right hand and left. Regardless of whether we are honored or dishonored, spoken of favorably or unfavorably, we are called impostors, yet we are truthful. We are called unknowns, yet we are famous. We are said to be dying, yet we are alive, punished but not put to death, sorrowful, though we are always rejoicing, poor, yet we enrich many. We seem to have nothing, yet we possess everything. Santa Sabiduría, Santa Palabra. Gracias a Dios. Please be seated. In this season, we have been sharing stories of generosity, of the impact of this community, leading up to Intent Sunday last Sunday, and also Intent Sunday Part 2 this Sunday, for those who were not able to be here last week. And so our storyteller today is Brent Wilson, who is doing double duty on Zoom and a storyteller. So we thank you, Brent, for sharing your story with us today.
So my history with Levin began at something called the Wild Goose Festival in September of 2012. And Wild Goose is a lesser known image for the Holy Spirit than the dove, typically, I guess, in Christian symbology, but I think it's more badass. And it was there I met another badass who is currently our interim pastor. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had my first one-to-one conversation with Solveig. And up until then, I had only known the church called Redeemer as the location of the Northeast Portland Tool Library. I had visited almost all the Episcopal churches in Portland and a few of the Lutheran ones, but I had never attended Redeemer, though it was the closest one to my house. And I was looking for a faith community similar to the evangelical churches I had grown up in and attended while I was in seminary in New York, but minus the fundamentalist theology and the conservative politics. So I wanted the community without the exclusivity of those denominations. And I found progressive churches that were more inclusive, but only for an hour or so on Sunday mornings, with virtually no relationships throughout the rest of the week. One of the things I found most hurtful about the big wealthy churches I attended for a few years was that when I tried to volunteer, they didn't seem to value my ability to contribute anything meaningful. And the last straw for me was when I failed to make the cut after auditioning to read the scriptures for the services on Sunday. And since I had moved to Oregon right when the dot-com bubble burst, I spent several years trying to find a real job in the midst of the highest unemployment rate in the country. But no one at the church seemed to care about my struggles in this new place without friends or family. And I had to file for bankruptcy because of my student loans and the credit card debt. But I did get a call from someone there each year asking me about my annual pledge. I did even go back to attending some evangelical churches here in Portland to find that community I was missing. And I made some, there I am. I did find some of that missing community, made some good friends. But while these churches appeared to be somewhat progressive, in the end they still clung to that literal interpretation of the Bible that was more exclusive than inclusive. And so it was a few years since I'd given up finding a truly progressive faith community when I met Solveig at that conference, all thanks to that wild goose. Solveig valiantly tried to explain what was then called the Leaven Project, and also the faith community that she led at the time, known as Wilderness Way, that sometimes met there whenever they weren't gathering together at the Audubon Society or Tryon Creek to have church in the wild. We also had dinners together and hung out at various people's houses. But I was curious to visit a Redeemer service and meet the crazy folks who dreamt up this Leaven Project. And I met another badass wild goose the first time I visited that service, and Melissa invited me to meet up for another of these one-on-ones at Townsend's Tea House on Alberta. And I was excited to learn more about the partnerships with other organizations and individuals that the Leaven Project was going to enable for our neighbors who weren't interested in a Christian worship service that happened from 11 a.m. to about 12:30 p.m. every Sunday. These folks who still want to work together to make our neighborhoods better throughout the rest of the week. And then I'm not sure when I first met Jocelyn and how that happened, but because she didn't attend the Sunday services, but somehow I found out about the Kitchen Commons, and I was excited to not only break bread with these other folks outside of a Sunday service, but also prepare the meals together and learn new recipes. And Jocelyn is one of the few wild geese that I've seen in person throughout the pandemic, because she brought checks for me to sign in her current capacity as our bookkeeper. Early on, we had also developed significant relationships with people of other faith communities through our membership in MACG and the Industrial Areas Foundation. So I got involved in the work of organizing toward more affordable housing here and attended many hours of training in Saul Alinsky's method. I recommend that. They're starting up some more rounds of that now. I think maybe we just had a couple, but there should be more coming, right? I had moved from New York City to Portland with a sense that New York City was too big to make any real difference, or to be able to hold those politicians accountable. But early in my time here, I saw Mayor Vera Katz pushing her shopping cart around the Trader Joe's. And then I also saw Sam Adams riding my bus one day. And I thought that this is a city that's on a more reasonable scale, a human scale. But I never really dreamed at that time that a few years later I'd be sitting down with the mayor and the city commissioners and even testifying before state legislators down in Salem to get them to fund housing projects or enact policies to promote more affordable housing. And since I have a tiny house in my yard, I have directly benefited from our lobbying to get the city council to put a moratorium on convictions until the housing code could be updated to allow for them. And I've been able to volunteer time in this organizing, especially the meetings during the weekdays when the city council meets and we can meet with the politicians, because I experienced other periods of unemployment or underemployment as I have transitioned to a new career in the library field. It also helps being single and without the responsibility of raising children. Working part-time or not at all has allowed me to volunteer time towards the technology needs of the Levin community as well. And I can take pride in how it benefits our Salt and Light services, but I also get to see how it benefits our building partners as I work with them on the Wi-Fi and getting our network updated. And Ruben also was a big part of getting that working. I have contributed financially as I've been employed over the years and able to do so. But I appreciate that I have the opportunity to invest in Levin in these ways by volunteering my time. And I guess it's also helped me notice the gaggle of wild geese working behind the scenes to keep this place running and keep the lights on, in addition to the financial support that we contribute. Joe and Debbie Morgan have been trading off the treasurer position for as long as I've been here, 10 years. I think they're looking for replacement now. Eric and Lois Jordao count the offering, and deposit the checks after every service. I think I've also seen Jim Francis doing that in pre-pandemic times, maybe. And Eric processes all the donor receipts that you get. I don't know, that's been more than 10 years. I don't know how long that's been going on. Oh, it was before my time. So I don't want to derail anyone who's considering doubling their pledge this year, of course. But if you are, struggling financially and still want to increase your contribution to our community, I'm suggesting that there's a few ways you might be able to do that. There isn't exactly a place on the intents form, but there is this other line where you could write down something somewhere where you might want to stretch. And more specifically, we're looking for a few folks to help out with the audio visuals for the Sunday service, and including online Zoom duties, so you can also work remotely, you guys that join us online. Levita is also helping out. Although she's in the building, she's in the office doing the work on Zoom today. It basically means arriving about an hour early to get set up, and if you're doing it online, it just means a few minutes before the start to make sure you can let everybody into the Zoom meeting. Of course, there's an initial training that might take a little more time, but after that, it's a pretty low level of commitment, I'd say. We don't want to hog all the fun here, do we, Levita?
No, we don't want to hog all the fun.
There are no auditions, and so you can't get cut from the tech team. Yeah. So fill out those intent forms, or come see me after the service. That's my story.